Who had been elected as an independent in 2003 on a Save Stop Hill Hospital ticket. The SNP were keen to capitalise on that vote because she had about 10,000 votes. And Ms Robinson was quoted in the local press with a big banner headline, SNP will save Stop Hill casualty. Ms Robinson went further, stating, we are committed to retaining Stop Hill as a small general hospital with a casualty unit and an appropriate number of inpatient beds. Now, on the basis of that promise, many people in the area voted for the SNP, and their candidate was runner-up to me, and they also won 8 council seats. Those who did so have been made to look foolish, for there is absolutely no chance of a small general hospital being built at Stop Hill, and efforts by the campaigners to get Nicola Sturgeon and Shona Robinson to live up to their pre-election promise have simply fallen on deaf ears. In Mr Allan's own constituency, there's a huge row over the planning application for a wind farm development. I think it's fair to say that he probably won his seat because of his opposition to the development, hiding behind the claim that people of Lewis would be given a referendum before a final decision was taken. SNP ministers have now said they are minded to refuse the development, despite the fact the Western Isles Council want it, and even the SNP group on the council support it, as far as I believe. However, there's no sign of the much-promised referendum. So let's look at the question, how have the SNP performed in government? In my opinion, you cannot go on breaking promises like that without affecting the political process. A poll to be published tomorrow, but in the Daily Record and others today, says that when questioned how much do you trust the Scottish Executive stroke Parliament to work in Scotland's best interests, 57% said most of the time, up from 43% last time. Now, naturally, the SNP and their spinmeisters are claiming that this is because they're in government. But the truth is that they've claimed headlines over fighting with Westminster, as they said they would, over issues like airgun bans, broadcasting powers, and even which flag should fly where at Edinburgh Castle. And that's not what government is about. So far, in my contention, the SNP have failed to deliver on the big issues affecting Scotland today, on housing, on education, on tackling poverty, and training the workforce of tomorrow. They will be found out, and just like the Romans in my constituency, sent homeward to think again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, John Luntz with the Conservatives. Thank you.
Well, before I stand up tonight, the first thing I always do is check the mobile phone is off. Because the last thing you want to be doing when you're speaking engagements like this, or indeed in Parliament, is for your mobile phone to go off. And I'm always recall a story about Claire Short, who some of you will remember was in Tony Blair's cabinet, one of Tony Blair's first cabinet indeed, and she was appointed to the Privy Council, and at the first meeting she had with the Queen, her mobile phone went off. Her mobile phone must be like mine, because once somebody leaves a message, the 121 service kicks in, and it rings again, it rings again, it rings again, until you actually answer it. So poor Claire was in there with the Queen, the phone rings, somebody trying to get her, and then somebody leaves a message, it rings again, it rings again. The third time it rings, the Queen says to Claire Short, perhaps you should answer that, Claire, it might be somebody important. So on that note, my phone is off. Now, unlike some of the other contributions you're probably going to hear in tonight's debate, I'm going to take an entirely impartial view, an independent assessment of the SNP's record in government. I'm not going to be wearing the rose-tinted glasses that my Labour colleague David Whitton was wearing during his contribution, as he remembered having a Labour government in Scotland. Indeed, let me start by pointing out to Mr Whitton that it was his Labour Party colleagues, or his Labour Party colleagues were not really in any position to criticise the SNP government or to accuse anyone of breaking election promises. We only need to look at his party's record in government. The Liberal Labour administration told us that growing Scotland's economy was going to be its top priority. But economic growth throughout Labour's period in government continued to lag behind that of the UK as a whole. That was administration that told us it was going to reduce class sizes for secondary 1 and 2 classes for maths and English to a maximum of 20. But later said that that figure was an average rather than a maximum. That was administration that told us there would be public involvement in health service reorganisation, but nevertheless went ahead with cutbacks and closures but despite vigorous local opposition, including in my own constituency when they shut Jedburgh and Coldstream Cottage hospitals. That was the administration that promised us new bans for council tax, which, thank goodness, never got round to implementing. And that was the administration that promised to eradicate poverty and social exclusion, but under whose stewardship the gap between the richest and the poorest got wider. And just in case Liam McArthur and the Liberal Democrats think that he's going to get off the hook with this one, I'd like to remind him gently that they are equally as culpable for all the failures during the last 8 years. So let's get back to the subjects of this debate, the success or otherwise of the SNP in government. David Whitton for Labour has set out a number of SNP pre-election promises that appeared in their election manifesto that they have undoubtedly failed to deliver in government. The failure to employ an additional 1,000 extra police officers, which has been watered down. The failure to implement smaller class sizes in every primary school, which we now know cannot be afforded. And a failed plan to give £2,000 to first-time buyers, which has been quietly dropped. Whilst we, the Conservatives, remain committed through the budget process to ensure the SNP do in fact deliver on their promise for extra police, the abandonment of some of the other policies was more than welcome to us on the Conservative benches. As we said, they were nonsense. Some of these policies were nonsense at the time, and they remain nonsense now. The proposal to give a £2,000 grant to first-time buyers was a self-cancelling policy which would have stoked inflation and taken house prices further out of the reach of young people and families. Similarly, the class sizes policy was never going to work, could not be afforded, was of dubious educational value, and would have led to many children being refused admission to the schools that their parents wanted them to attend. We do not in the least lament the departure of these policies. On the other hand, the summary words by Kenny McCaskill and others on the subject of additional police numbers, a policy that is both desirable and achievable, betrays the superficial cynicism that's typical of much of the SNP manifesto. That said, there are other aspects of the SNP's manifesto which can be supported and we will support. There was a commitment in the SNP manifesto to adopt the Better Regulation Commission's one in, one out policy, which means that for each new regulation created by government, one would be removed. This was a policy which the Conservatives would have happily supported. However, the proposal has already been ruled out. In the autumn, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Sustainable Growth, John Swinney MSP, told us that the proposal has been ruled out because it's too simplistic. What a pity that the SNP did not consider whether the policy was too simplistic before it decided to put it in its manifesto. If the policy is too simplistic, what does that say about all the other carefully crafted policies in the SNP's manifesto? Are they all to be equally damned and quietly forgotten about now that the SNP leaders have the responsibility of government? It is true, as I'm sure Alasadair Allan is about to point out, that this session of Parliament will last for 4 years, and the government will be judged for its performance over the full term rather than in the early stages. But the essence of tonight's debate concerns the SNP's record in government so far, and the SNP's election manifesto that has, in significant respects, been abandoned in short order. So how will the SNP defend its record? What is Alasadair Allan about to tell? Well, it's very obvious from what we've heard from the SNP already. They're going to be playing the victim card, blaming Westminster and blaming its minority position for its failure to deliver, with no acknowledgement that some of the policies were just plain daft in the first place. We in the Conservative side of the Parliament do not intend to let the SNP get away with that. We will be pleased to cooperate with it in implementing policies which we agree with and policies which we campaign for. It is up to the government to reach an accommodation with the other parties and policies where we do not agree. Many of the policies highlighted on tonight's